Okay, on to pixel layer masking. I'm going to go ahead and open up this demo file number 2. Again, you can follow along as we do this thing here. So before we were doing compositing with erasing, it's a pain, right? Sorry about that. But I think that it's important to do that first so you sort of understand how pixel layers work, and also so that you appreciate so much more when we do it this way. The big thing about doing it with masking is that it is non-destructive, right? Meaning that I can get rid of something, and then if I change my mind, I don't have to restart. I don't have to copy in those pixels again. I can simply mask them off and then unmask them. And that will mean that all of the editing we're doing, we can do it, we can save it, we can come back like a week later, change our mind, feather it a little bit, tweak what's showing and what's not. Just such a better way to work. So non-destructive editing, super important. So here is our first pixel masking exercise. And in it we have 2 layers, right? This one, this top pixel layer already has a mask there, right? You recognize that mask from all of our adjustment layers. We can see that it is white, right? If I hit the slash, I don't see anything. We can see that it's white, which means that it is showing this entire layer. So I'm going to grab my brush, B on the keyboard. I'm going to come up here and pull my flow up to 100% and come over here, hit the brush in the folder, turn off transfer dynamics. And now I'm just going to come over here and scribble around, right? And nothing happens. Why is that? Well, nothing is happening because I am scribbling around with white paint on a white mask. I can't show it any more than it is, so I need to get black paint. Boom, there we go. And now, whoa, look at that. So you can see as I put that black paint onto the mask, it hides my pixel layer and I see what is below it. If I switch back to white paint, right, then it does the opposite. It's a little laggy because my computer is not the world's fastest thing out there. Okay, so that's how masking pixel layers works. Essentially the same as masking anything else, right? Put that black paint on there, whatever layer has that mask is hidden. Switch, hit X on the keyboard to white paint, and boopity boop boop. The layer that I am on, now the mask is showing me that layer. So pretty straightforward as a concept. I don't know. There's some other things in here. I don't even know what. Got like 3 pages in here? That's crazy. All right. So those are the basics. Now, unlike a adjustment layer, a pixel layer does not start out with a mask associated with it. So if we go over here to our layers palette, I can click on that thumbnail and hit the little trash can down there. It'll ask me if I want to apply the mask. Usually the answer is no, right? Applying the mask means that it would use it to actually erase anything that was hidden. I can count on the fingers of no hands the number of times I've wanted to do that. So nope, just delete it. Thank you very much. So when you open up a layer, pixel layer, this is usually what you're going to have. Pixel layer, and that's it. If we want to make a mask on there so that we can mask things off, we want to come down here to the bottom. There is a little icon that says Add Layer Mask. It looks to me like the Japanese flag, so that's what I call it. So I click on the Japanese flag, and you can see now that that thumbnail pops up, and again, by default, it's white, meaning that the layer is showing itself. Now, if I come in here, again, it's the same thing. Anytime I put paint down there, I can put paint on there however I want. I can grab the paint bucket and bloop, just throw it in there. I can hit Command-I to invert that, so that whole black thing now becomes a whole white thing. The one thing I will caution you about is that with a pixel layer, it is a lot easier, to accidentally start painting on the pixel layer. With an adjustment layer, you can't really paint on the adjustment part of it, There's just a mask. That's kind of all you can do. Here, because we're working with this layer, we're constantly selecting this layer, selecting a different layer, whatever. It is a lot easier to accidentally start painting not on the mask, but on the actual layer. So keep an eye out for that. Remember, if you do that, all you have to do is come up here to your history and step back. It's all good. Okay, so there's a little bit more stuff in here talking about making your brush soft or hard or whatever, but I'm going to go ahead and ignore that for now. You're welcome to flip through it. And I'm going to go on to our demo number 2. So I'm going to close out of this file. I'm not going to save it. Demo number 3. Okay, so now we understand how masks work. Here we are starting a little bit more from scratch. Here is this thing that's a little bit more like a candlestick. In fact, I'm going to call it that. Brass candlestick thing. And I'm going to do my standard operation when I'm working just with a few layers. Put that original down below there, turn it off, cool. So now I've got this guy here. And what I would like to do, like any good e-commerce merchant, I would like to be able to cut out this brass, whatever it is, Put it on a nice white backdrop, sell it to a bunch of unsuspecting children, whatever. So what I want to have when I erase or mask off all that background is white. So I'm going to go ahead and put a solid white back there. To do that, I could make a new layer and paint bucket in some white. I'm actually going to go ahead and use that solid color adjustment layer. So again, that was going down here to your black and white cookie, click on it, and solid color. It actually happens to already be on white. That's great. If it weren't there already, you could go down here to the R, G, and B values and put in 255. That would also give you a solid white. Cool, so now it's back there. Doesn't make any difference, because it's hidden underneath my brass candlestick thing. But if I turn that off, I can see that lovely white thing. So remember when we did the dodging and burning, The first thing that we did before we made that curves adjustment layer was we made a selection around the area we wanted to deal with, because that meant that when we made that new adjustment layer with that layer mask, it automatically started out of the box with that selected area masked off. We're going to do the same thing here, I could go in here and take my brush and go in here and make a layer and just like, That's certainly a possibility. Oof. But that requires a lot more skill with a brush than I have, I'm not great at that. So instead, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to throw away that bad mask, just delete it. What I would like to do instead is I want to select all the area that I want to have masked off. Right? So here that's pretty straightforward because it's on a white backdrop. So I can do that a couple of different ways. The first way I'm going to do it is with the Magic Wand tool. Now, Magic Wand may not be on the top of your stack. If you come over here, click on Hold, right, you'll see there are 3 tools, at least here, and one of them for me is the Magic Wand tool. So how the Magic Wand tool works is that I can click on part of my image, whatever, and it's going to say, okay, whatever pixel Brad clicked on, right, what color is it? What tone is it, right? And then it's going to say, okay, how about the pixel next to it? And if that's close enough, it's going to include it in the selection. Then it's going on to the next pixel. All right, how about that one? If that's close enough, it's also going to be included in the selection. How about the one beyond that? If it's close enough, it's also going to be included in the selection. So what the Magic Wand tool does, it selects a bunch of pixels that are all relatively similar. And we can determine how similar they need to be in order to be included. So let's look at how we do that. So Magic Wand up here at the top, first thing I'm going to look at is sample size. I'm going to set it to 3x3 average. That means when I click on something, instead of looking only at a single pixel and saying, okay, that's my starting point for whether things are similar or different, it's going to look at a group of pixels and average them. The reason I set it to that is in case there's like, I don't know, a piece of dust or some other random thing that one pixel happens to be weird, right? I feel like this gives me a little bit better value. Tolerance, right? This is where we say, how different does the next pixel have to be before we say, no, that's not part of our selection. So most of the time you're going to set it, I don't know, somewhere between 8 and 32, 16 and 32, whatever. I'm going to bump it up a little bit here. Maybe I'll try 16. That seems pretty reasonable. If I set it to its lowest possible value, which I think is 0, maybe it's 1, then any difference at all in the adjacent pixel means that it's not included. If I set it to the highest value, which I think is either 255 or 256, then all the pixels would be selected no matter what, because they would be like, okay, well, close enough, right? Blue, well, that's kind of like red. Sure, fine. But all right, I'm going to go ahead and set it to 16. Anti-alias means that it's not going to give me like jagged edges. Contiguous means that it is going to select the areas of color that are connected physically, instead of being like, oh, well, here's this nice light white area. Oh, and inside of that brass shape, there's also something. No, it's surrounded by this yellow color. It's not connected physically to that white backdrop. It's going to ignore it, hopefully. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click back there. And it did a pretty good job, right? You can see those marching ants. It got a lot of that backdrop and missed a little bit, right? There's this show card back here helping work on the reflection. Didn't pick that up, didn't expect it to. Also some stuff down here. So I'm going to deselect Command D, and I'm going to make it a little bit more forgiving of some differences, set my tolerance to 32. And you can see that by doing that, it got rid of some of the problems we had down here, right? When I had it at 16, just to step back to that, when I had it at 16, right, there was area that was a little bit darker here that was kind of a shadow, right? That wasn't included. There was some, like, I don't know, scuff or hair or something on the seamless. That wasn't included. If I put it to 32, right, those things are close enough that a lot more of them are being included in my selection. Now, there are some things that, right, I would like to have this area where this card is, I'd like to have that be included in the selection. I'd like to have that be masked off. Luckily, right, there's more than one way to make a selection. I'm going to go grab the marquee tool. That's M on the keyboard. I'm going to hold down Shift. You'll see now there's a little plus next to my cursor. And I'm going to draw a box that includes that show card area. And you can see that that added it to the selection. So holding down Shift adds things to my selection, right? So I could go in here and I'm like, okay, well, I don't want that little island of scuff in there. Hold down Shift. I can do it if I was like, hey, I'm really dumb. No, I just took out the middle of my candlestick. Not great. Command Z, undo it. So now we're pretty good, right? If I zoom in here, we have a reasonable line running around this candlestick. It's not perfect, but it's not bad. But something you do notice is there are little tiny dots here and there where like a piece of dust or dirt or something on there was different enough that it didn't get included. And I don't want to run around and look at all of those and try and find them. I could. Seems like a pain. So instead, I'm going to do something that I've set up on an action or as an action on my home computer, but you can do it however you want, which is I'm going to take this selection that I have here. I'm going to expand it a little bit. I'm going to pull it back to where it started, and I'm going to make those edges a little softer. So by expanding it, it takes any of those little tiny holes in the selection. It expands the selection big enough that it essentially wipes out those holes, right? So there's a little hole here, everything around it expands, right? Fills in that hole. Then when we go to contract back to where we started, the hole is gone, right? So there's nothing to contract back to. So it's a way of getting rid of little holes in your mask. So how do we do that? If we go up here to Select, Modify, and Expand, right? And again, all of this is in the handout. So Select Menu, because we're working with a selection, Modify, because we want to modify where our selection is, and Expand, right? Because we want to expand it out into those holes. I don't know, let's say 4 pixels. I don't want to do that at the edge of the canvas, right? I don't need to expand beyond the canvas. That doesn't make any sense. Cool. So I did that, and I think it did a pretty good job. There are probably a few little holes. It's a little hard for me to tell because my screen is kind of dirty. Looks like there's one more down there. I'm going to go ahead and use the marquee tool, M on the keyboard, hold down Shift, and just select it. That's good. But generally that looks pretty good. Now again, when it expanded, it also expanded in on the edges of this candlestick shape, right? So if I had done that a little bit more, that would be a problem. And that's why we pull it back. So I go back to Select, Modify, Contract, and usually we contract it by about the same amount. In this case, I don't think it's a bad idea for it to come in a little bit tighter on that candlestick. So I'm going to give us 1 pixel. I'm going to contract it by 3 pixels. Okay. So again, it didn't bring back any of the holes that were there because they had already been completely filled in. So now we have a selection that has selected out the whole area that we want to be hidden by our mask, right? We can always go back in with a brush and fix it a little bit later, right? So I'm not worrying about down at the bottom where there's that little bit of sort of darker shadow area that's not being picked up. I'm going to go now, make sure I'm on my brass candlestick layer, and I'm going to come down here, hit the Japanese flag to make a new layer mask. Because I have an active selection, I've got those marching ants, it's going to use that as the initial thing that's being masked off. So I'm going to go ahead and hit it, right? Now you'll notice that it did the opposite of what we want, right? Why? Well, because we had selected that background. So it said, okay, you want to see the background. That's the part you want to be showing, right? The same way with the curves layer, right? We made that adjustment, we made that box. The area that was selected still had that curves layer showing what it was doing. Here, right, we selected all of that background, and it's still showing that background when we add the layer mask. But I do this all the time. Super easy to fix. We just make sure that we're there on that layer mask, and we want to invert it, right? So that everything that's currently being hidden is being shown. Just hit Command I for invert, bloop, and there you go. You are probably smarter than me, but I swear I have to do this all the time. If we were using the magic wand on like a discrete object sitting in this field, if I had a red ball, right, nice, solid, bright red ball in a weird multicolored background, I could select the red ball, make a layer mask, right, and it would just show the rubber ball and everything else would be hidden, right? Most of the time though, we're selecting everything behind it. And we just have to hit Command I to invert it, and it's no big deal. Okay, so all of that looks pretty good. I'm going to come in here to the bottom where that's a little like bleh. Grab my brush, make it smaller. My flow is pretty high. I think that seems reasonable. And it's a little bit too soft on the edge. Zoom in there. Cool. Right? If you screw up, hit X to go back to black paint, and you can paint it back in. So that is a pretty straightforward way to get your mask on. One thing that we will probably want to do in this assignment when we're looking at stuff is go back in with your brush and just touch it up a little bit. You can also go in and in this layer mask, if I select that layer mask and I go here to properties, one of the properties is feather. Feather is going to be how hard edged the edge of that layer mask is, and you can always give it a pixel or two of feather. That's going to fuzzy it up a little bit. You don't want to do too much, but it is a way to make it a little bit less abrupt and sort of smooth out any small irregularities. But again, with something like this, going back over it with the brush, great idea. Highly recommend doing it for your homework because otherwise you will probably have some problems. Last thing that I'm going to do here is just like I did with the dodge and burn curves mask. I'm going to go ahead and look at it in red, and then I'm going to hold down Option and click on it and see it in black and white. It's going to be a little bit easier there to spot if I have any holes in it. But no, it looks pretty good. Hit Option again, click on it. And I would say that that is splendid. All right, so we're going to move now on to the next method of selecting things. And we'll catch you with that.